Most people have no idea that the most efficient fighting force the ancient world ever produced wasn't fueled by grand feasts or exotic supplements. It wasn't built on meat alone. And it wasn't dependent on supply lines carrying food across thousands of miles of frozen steppe. It was built on roots, specific plants pulled from the earth, chewed raw or boiled into broth, carried in saddlebags and hidden pouches across one of the most punishing landscapes human beings have ever marched across. The Mongol army of Genghis Khan crossed mountains, deserts, and forests that should have broken any fighting force. They moved faster than anyone thought possible. They healed wounds that would have killed soldiers from any other army. And they stayed on the march for months at a time without the kind of logistical support every other civilization depended on. Today, we're uncovering 6 of the roots that made that possible. Stay with us, because number 3 on this list was so important to the Mongol medical kit that it was traded across half of Asia, and modern researchers are now studying it for effects that sound almost impossible to believe. And number 1, the final root, was considered so powerful that it appeared in the personal remedy pouches of Mongol nobility and is still sold in Asian herbal markets today for the exact same reasons. 6 roots, 800 years of evidence still standing. Let's get into it. Number 6, burdock root. The everyday survival food that kept soldiers going. If you had to pick one plant to sustain a long marching army across varied terrain, burdock would be near the top of the list. And that's almost certainly why it was. Burdock grew prolifically across much of the Eurasian steppe, which meant Mongol riders and foot soldiers could dig it fresh from the ground in territory they were already passing through. No storage, no transport, no preservation required. Pull it up, clean it off, and eat it or boil it into a broth by the fire at night. What the Mongols may not have had language for, but what their bodies responded to every single day, was burdock's remarkable nutritional and medicinal profile. The root is rich in inulin, a type of soluble fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and supports blood sugar regulation. It contains powerful antioxidant compounds including quercetin and luteolin, which protect the body's cells from the kind of oxidative stress that comes with sustained physical exertion. Traditional medicine systems across Asia and Europe have used burdock for centuries as a blood purifier, a liver tonic, and a general support remedy for anyone worn down by hard physical labor. Modern research has begun to confirm many of these traditional uses. Studies have shown that burdock root extract supports liver detoxification, exhibits antimicrobial properties against a range of bacteria and fungi, and may help regulate inflammation throughout the body. Here's what makes this particularly important for an army on the move. Mongol soldiers lived primarily on meat, dairy, and whatever plant foods they could gather along the route. That kind of diet, while high in protein and fat, can stress the liver and slow the digestive system over time. Burdock root, eaten regularly, acted as a natural counterbalance. It supported the organs that were doing the hardest work, fed the gut bacteria that were keeping the immune system strong, and provided a steady source of slow-burning energy that didn't spike and crash. The soldiers who ate burdock didn't know about inulin or quercetin. They knew that the days they dug it up and added it to the evening pot, they felt better the next morning. That was enough. Boiled with a little salt, simmered alongside tough cuts of meat to tenderize both the meat and the fiber of the root, or eaten raw in small amounts when nothing else was available. Burdock was one of the quiet, consistent foundations of Mongol field nutrition. It didn't need to be dramatic. It just needed to be there, and it was. Number 5, rhodiola root. The high-altitude secret that prevented exhaustion. Of all the plants the Mongol army had access to, few were more precious than rhodiola. And the reason comes down to something very specific about how their bodies responded to the environments they were crossing. Rhodiola grows at high altitudes across the mountains of Central Asia, Siberia, and the colder regions of Mongolia. For thousands of years, the people living in these regions observed something remarkable about this particular root. Those who consumed it regularly seemed to tolerate cold better, recover from exhaustion faster, and handle the oxygen-thin air of high altitudes with significantly less difficulty than those who didn't. Modern research has given a name to what those ancient communities were observing. Rhodiola is what's now called an adaptogen, a class of plants that appears to help the body adapt to physical, mental, and environmental stress. Scientific studies have shown that rhodiola can reduce perceived exertion during physical work, improve stamina in endurance tasks, and support mental clarity under fatigue. Additional research has found that it may help regulate cortisol, the primary stress hormone, and improve recovery after intense physical output. For a Mongol soldier crossing mountain passes at elevation, carrying weapons and equipment on a horse or on foot for days at a time, often in brutal cold, this was not a supplement. It was a strategic advantage. Rhodiola was typically prepared as a tea or chewed directly from the dried root. The roots were collected carefully, cleaned, and dried slowly to preserve the active compounds, then bundled and stored in leather pouches that commanders and shamans alike kept as part of the essential field kit. Most people miss this. The Mongol military wasn't just a fighting force. It was a deeply organized system with its own medical traditions, and rhodiola sat at the center of that system for any operation that involved cold weather, high altitude, or extended physical stress. The root was so valued that it was traded between tribes, carried across vast distances, and considered by some clans to be as essential to a campaign as weapons themselves. Today, rhodiola is widely sold in Western herbal markets as a supplement for stress and physical performance. The research supporting its use continues to grow every year, but the soldiers of Genghis Khan were using it at scale for exactly these purposes 800 years ago, and relying on it for outcomes their lives depended on. Number 4. Dandelion root. The bitter remedy that cleaned the blood. Dandelion is one of the most widespread plants on Earth, and for most of human history, that was a blessing rather than a nuisance. Mongol soldiers, like the communities they came from, relied on dandelion as a regular part of their diet in ways that modern people have almost entirely forgotten. The root specifically, not just the leaves, was the prize. Dandelion root has a long history of use across traditional medicine systems in China, Mongolia, Korea, and much of Europe as a liver tonic and digestive bitter. Ancient practitioners across these traditions independently arrived at the same conclusion. Eating or drinking preparations of dandelion root supported liver function, stimulated digestion, and helped clear the body of what they described as sluggishness and accumulated toxins. Modern research supports many of these traditional uses. Dandelion root contains compounds that stimulate bile production, which in turn supports the digestion of fats and the processing of waste products through the liver. It delivers inulin, the same prebiotic fiber found in burdock, which feeds beneficial gut bacteria. It's a source of potassium, magnesium, and a range of antioxidant compounds that protects cells from oxidative damage. For a Mongol soldier whose diet was heavy in meat, fat, and fermented dairy, A regular intake of dandelion root was exactly what the body needed to process that kind of food efficiently. Without it, the liver would have become overloaded. With it, the system stayed clean and functional through campaigns that lasted months. Dandelion root was typically roasted over a fire, then steeped in hot water to make a dark, earthy, slightly bitter tea. This preparation not only extracted the medicinal compounds, but also produced a warming drink that soldiers could consume at the end of a long day. In colder seasons, the roasted root was also chewed directly or added to stews to deepen the flavor and introduce the bitter compounds that stimulated digestion. Here's what makes this remarkable. Dandelion wasn't some exotic plant hunted down in far-off territory. It grew everywhere the Mongol army went. That's exactly what made it so valuable. The commanders and healers traveling with the army didn't need to secure a supply line for dandelion. They just needed soldiers who knew what to look for, and those soldiers had known how to identify and harvest this plant since childhood. The most effective medicine isn't always the rarest. Sometimes it's the one growing under your feet that you've been trained for generations to recognize. And if you're finding any of this useful, take a second to hit like and subscribe. We go deep on the forgotten plants and practices that kept ancient civilizations healthy and strong, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Number 3, astragalus root, the immune fortress. And here we come to one of the most important roots in the entire Mongol medical tradition, a plant so central to Chinese, Mongolian, and Central Asian traditional medicine that it was traded across half of Asia and considered indispensable for any army operating far from home. Astragalus has been used for over 2,000 years across traditional medicine systems in this region. Practitioners describe it as a root that strengthens what they called the protective energy of the body, a concept that modern immunology has since translated into terms we can measure. Astragalus contains polysaccharide compounds, flavonoids, and saponins that directly influence the function of the immune system. Modern research on astragalus is extensive and growing every year. Studies have shown that astragalus extract can stimulate the activity of immune cells, increase the production of antibodies, and support the body's response to viral and bacterial infections. Additional research has explored its role in supporting cardiovascular health, protecting the kidneys, and reducing fatigue in individuals dealing with chronic stress or recovery from illness. For a Mongol army operating across foreign territory, exposed to new pathogens, working through wounds and fatigue, astragalus was a fundamental piece of the medical kit. Commanders traveling with physicians and shamans carried astragalus in dried form, and the root was added to broths, teas, and soups throughout a campaign. Wounded soldiers received astragalus preparations as part of their recovery protocol. Soldiers worn down by cold or long marches received it to support their resistance to the illness that almost always followed sustained physical stress. Most people walk right past this detail when they read about the Mongol conquests. The military success of Genghis Khan's army wasn't only about horsemanship, discipline, or tactics. It was also about a medical infrastructure that kept soldiers healthier, recovering faster, and fighting longer than the armies they faced. Astragalus was at the heart of that infrastructure. Preparation was straightforward. The root was cut into thin slices and simmered in water for an extended period, often for 1 to 2 hours, to draw out the full range of active compounds. The resulting broth was consumed on its own, or used as the base for soups and medicinal teas. For faster field use, a soldier could chew a piece of the dried root directly, releasing the compounds slowly over the course of a ride or march. Today, Astragalus is increasingly being rediscovered by Western herbalists and researchers. It appears in supplements, immune support formulas, and traditional Chinese medicine preparations sold in markets all over the world. The Mongols were 8 centuries ahead of this trend, and they were using astragalus at a scale and intensity that modern research is still working to understand. Number 2. Licorice root. The sweet fixer that tied the remedies together. If you've ever chewed a piece of real licorice root, you know immediately why the Mongols valued it. The flavor is sweet, distinct, and long-lasting, and a small amount goes a long way. But the reason this root became such a consistent presence in Mongol and traditional Asian medicine goes far beyond the taste. Licorice root has been used in traditional Chinese and Mongolian medicine for thousands of years, and in those traditions, it plays a specific and remarkable role. It's described as a harmonizer, a root that supports and balances the effects of other herbs and roots it's combined with. Mongol healers, drawing on this tradition, included licorice in the majority of their medicinal preparations precisely for this reason. Modern research has begun to illuminate why. Licorice root contains compounds including glycyrrhizin and a range of flavonoids that exhibit anti-inflammatory, antiviral, and soothing properties. Studies have shown that licorice extracts can support respiratory health, soothe irritated digestive lining, provide relief from cough and sore throat, and help regulate the body's response to stress through effects on the adrenal system. For a soldier breathing cold, dry, dusty air across open steppe, sometimes for weeks at a time, licorice root was an immediate ally. It soothed the throat, calmed the cough, and supported the lungs against the kind of respiratory irritation that could otherwise sideline a fighter for days. For a soldier dealing with digestive upset from unfamiliar food or contaminated water, a piece of licorice root chewed slowly or steeped in warm water eased the lining of the gut and reduced inflammation. And this is where it gets especially interesting. Mongol healers used licorice specifically to make other, more powerful roots easier to tolerate. Certain medicinal plants in the traditional kit were potent, but harsh on the stomach. Combined with licorice, those same plants could be administered more safely, with the licorice gentling their effects and ensuring the body could absorb the benefits without being overwhelmed. This kind of combination medicine, rooted in observation across generations, is exactly the kind of practice that modern herbalism is now working to systematically study and replicate. Licorice root was typically carried in dried form and chewed directly, or simmered into broths and teas alongside other medicinal roots. A small pouch of licorice could last a soldier for weeks, because the root is potent and only a small piece is needed at any given time. Most people think of licorice as candy. The Mongols thought of it as the root that made every other root work better. And they were right. Modern pharmacology is only now catching up to what their healers were observing 800 years ago. Number 1, ginseng root, the emperor of roots. And here is the one that changes how you read everything else. Ginseng has been called many things across its long history. Root of life, root of immortality, the king of herbs. Every major traditional medicine system across East and Central Asia has placed ginseng at or near the top of its materia medica, and the plant has been traded, hoarded, hunted, and protected for over 2,000 years. In the Mongol world, ginseng was considered the most valuable root a healer could carry. It appeared in the personal remedy pouches of Mongol nobility, in the medical supplies of commanders, and in the kits of the most important shamans and physicians traveling with the army. The wild ginseng that grew in the forests of Manchuria and the Russian Far East was so valuable that it was traded by weight against gold, and individual roots of exceptional age and size could be worth more than a soldier's horse. Here's what modern research has revealed about why. Ginseng root contains a unique class of compounds called ginsenosides, found almost nowhere else in nature. These compounds exhibit a wide and remarkable range of effects on the body. They support cardiovascular function, regulate blood sugar, enhance mental clarity and cognitive performance, reduce fatigue, support the immune system, and protect the brain from oxidative stress. Multiple clinical studies have confirmed what traditional practitioners observed for centuries. Regular consumption of ginseng can improve physical endurance, enhance recovery from exhaustion, support mental focus under pressure, and strengthen resistance to illness. Research on older adults has shown benefits for cognitive function and overall vitality. Research on athletes has shown improvements in performance and reduced markers of oxidative damage after intense physical exertion. For Genghis Khan and the inner circle of the Mongol military command, ginseng was not a casual herbal addition to the diet. It was a strategic resource. Commanders used it before major decisions and engagements to support mental clarity. Elite soldiers received it before the most demanding operations. Wounded officers received it as a core part of their recovery protocol. The oldest, most potent wild roots were reserved for the highest-ranking individuals in the command structure, because the healers who traveled with the army knew, based on generations of observation, that what ginseng did for the body was real and reliable. And here is the part that stops most people in their tracks. The ginseng that Mongol healers prized most, the slow-grown wild mountain ginseng of the forests north and east of the empire, is still hunted and sold in Asian herbal markets today. Top-quality wild roots still command prices that match precious metals. The traditional knowledge of how to identify, harvest, prepare, and use ginseng has been passed down in an unbroken line from the era of the Mongol Empire to the modern day, because nothing has come along that does what this root does. Preparation varied. A small piece of wild ginseng root was sometimes chewed directly, especially before a demanding march or an important engagement. More commonly, the root was sliced thin and simmered slowly in water to make a strong, earthy tea. For long-term storage and field use, ginseng was often dried and powdered, then added to broths or consumed by the teaspoon. The knowledge of when, how, and in what quantity to use ginseng was one of the most carefully guarded pieces of traditional medical expertise across the region. 800 years later, cardiovascular researchers, immunologists, sports medicine scientists, and pharmacologists keep arriving at the same place the Mongol healers were already standing. Ginseng was not folk superstition. It was a precise tool, deployed strategically, with outcomes observed and refined across generations of use. 6 roots, all of them pointing back to the same truth. The Mongol army didn't dominate the ancient world through tactics alone. They moved, fought, and endured as they did because they carried an entire system of medicine rooted in plants, and those plants worked. The soldiers who used these roots weren't primitive. They were the beneficiaries of a medical tradition that had been refined across thousands of years of observation, testing, and passing down in a culture that was deeply attuned to what the body needed and what the earth could provide. The commanders who relied on this system weren't making guesses. They were drawing on the accumulated wisdom of every healer who had ever watched a soldier recover faster, fight harder, or survive something that should have killed him because of a root pulled from the ground and prepared correctly. The difference between medicinal-grade plants and the watered-down versions sold in most modern supplement aisles matters more than most people realize. Wild harvested or carefully cultivated roots, properly dried and prepared, aren't the same product as mass-produced extracts made from young, cheap plant material. The ancient world knew this instinctively. Most of us have forgotten. If you're curious about any of these roots, start small. Pick one, look into how it's traditionally been used, and find a high-quality source that takes the preparation seriously. Drop a comment below and let me know which one caught your attention. I genuinely love knowing which of these old remedies people are drawn to. If you got something out of this video, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what we put out next. We uncover forgotten remedies, old practices, and the plants that kept entire civilizations moving, and the next one is already in the works. And if you're still curious, stick around.